So there's a transformation that's occurring in our industry, of course, and it's poorly understood, and we're all trying to understand it, literally. That's why we're here together today and tomorrow, to try to understand it. And in my books, I've tried to look a little bit ahead, about 5 years ahead, and try to anticipate how technology influences not only practice, but people. My books are not about technology per se, they're about how technology has an impact on practice and on the individuals within our industry. At the same time, of course, design and construction are changing. They're not changing because of technology, they're changing due to risk. And so while many of us in this room are very comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty, we need to become much more increasingly comfortable with certainty and clarity. And for that reason, we're leveraging tools, like computational tools, to try to work with data and algorithms in the cloud to try to move things forward. But the bottom line is that it's not the technology, it's risk we're trying to reduce, because while we're all very comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty, our clients and owners are not. And so we have new tools occurring all the time, needless to say, almost on a daily basis. And as a building designer throughout my career, primarily on high-rises, I spent many months each year designing building units within high-rise projects, primarily to get a permit set. So in other words, to meet code, you had to have egress addressed, and you had to have daylighting addressed, and all the issues. And those units, nobody would ever move into, not because they were pencil towers like the city we're in right now, New York, but because we primarily did these units for permit, and then the individual owners, the condo owners, would come in and do their own individual units. Now we have tools like what you're looking at behind me from Stanislas Chalou, a grad student at Harvard GSD, and many others, of course, that enable us to actually solve these problems and design these units in a fraction of the time that, that we did in our career. The way I look at it is we have really three options available to us. On the far left, to your left, is this whole idea that we'll have the opportunity to design nothing, that nobody will do the design, and that's represented right now by generative tools more than anything else. On the far right side is the opposite of that. It's where everybody designs everything. It's crowdsourcing, which if you think about it, something that's crowdsourced is also a generative tool. It's generated by people and not by algorithms and data. The middle is really where I focused a great deal of my attention over the last year that resulted in a new book. And I came up with a term called Augmented Architect that one of you pointed out to me was actually Doug Engelbart came up with it in the year I was born. But it's this idea of the Augmented Architect is the concept that I explore in a new book. And I asked, who would that be? And what would it mean to be augmented as an architect? And so I asked the question, what's a superuser? And a superuser is somebody who has the wherewithal to inquire into a tool, and the creativity to combine tools, and the curiosity to learn new tools, and the confidence to take a tool home and mess with it. But the most important thing is they have the interpersonal intelligence to connect with others, to move their firms, their teams, and the industry forward. In the book, I talk about several things. So one is super users are the people who get 80% of the results with 20% of the effort and 20% of the time. They're the people who are talent accelerants, who everybody wants to work around and work with because they make everybody better. And one of the ways I describe them are by these 10 C's, what I call the C factors in the book, 3 of which I'll point out very quickly, one of which is contextualizers. So basically when you're working using computational tools, or you're working on any problem within an architecture, engineering, or construction company, you zoom in and zoom out, and you ask yourself, who else could benefit from this? Secondarily, we have Capacitators, for anyone who's taken a car apart. It's basically like a capacitor in a car. Super users are the people who create capacity either by automating things or, like most of us in our careers, discover by saying yes to more things, we can actually take on more things and get more accomplished. And then finally, the last one I'd like to point out of these 10 is computational thinkers. That's not necessarily a skill set, it's a mindset where you're able to identify what have you done today 2 or 3 times that is basically doing the same thing that's repeatable, and therefore you can automate it, and therefore achieve great ends through other people. Wonderful discovery is that 9 out of these 10 C factors are soft skills. They're attitudes and mindsets. They're not hard skills. There's only one hard skill up there, of course, which is scripting, programming, or as it shows up there, coding. Another way to find out if you're a super user, if this is what your desk looks like, then chances are you are. But a super user is somebody who doesn't think about data or working digitally in terms of creating spreadsheets, but in terms of prototyping with sensors. And in doing so, moves things forward. As a university professor, I know very well, for the last 20 years, teaching the sophomore classes as well as final semester grad students, that the current cohort of students is going to transform the industry. The current demographic, which are Gen Zs, all of whom graduated this past weekend, are going to be entering our field. By the time you come back to your offices, resumes will be waiting for you. And they have what I identify in the book as 10 superpowers. And these superpowers are what distinguish them. And they're really unlike any demographic that came before. They really have the best qualities in a lot of ways. They're very loyal and hardworking. And for the next 5 to 7 years, we're going to have a renaissance in the AEC industry because of them. My concern is what's going to happen after that. Because they're very entrepreneurial, they're not entitled, but they're very entrepreneurial, they don't see themselves plugging themselves into becoming an architect, engineer, or contractor. It's not that they want to, quote unquote, own the whole process because they're entitled. They want to own the whole process because they're entrepreneurial. And so at that point, they're going to be disrupting the disruptors. They're going to be insurging the insurgents. And where we need for them to be is transforming the AEC industry within that circle, where we are, where we're all going to be on Wednesday when we go back to our firms. And we need to find ways to keep them happy, show them that they're valued, because we need them to help transform things for us. And so the single most important thing we can do is help them feel as though they are valued and teach them to stay. We want them to remain in the field to help us transform. As has been pointed out again and again, we have a tendency of doing things somewhat in silos and somewhat slowly. We don't have that advantage or opportunity or luxury right now. They are the ones who are going to help us to transform, and we have to find a way to keep them with us. Thank you.